Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Ephemeris podcast. I'm your host, Aphelion, and I apologize for missing weekly uploads recently. I hate to make excuses, but today or this week, I was working on kind of editing some of the descriptions for the older podcast episodes and adding some chapters, adding timestamps, editing some of the titles as well. So I was quite busy with that, and I didn't feel like doing podcast research on top of that. So I decided, since I have time to kind of churn out podcast research, I'd do a double episode again. And hopefully, the next episode will come no later than Wednesday. That is my hope, so that we can keep things flowing. But that is all I have to say about the logistics of the podcast. The topic of today's episode is the next piece to Greek astronomy, which we kind of took out of the chronological timeline, but we're still putting it in. It is Anaximander. And he was just a little bit earlier than Anaxagoras, but I mean, as long as we talk about him, kind of in this era before the 4th century BCE kind of boom in Greek astronomy, I think we'll be fine. So, Anaximander was the last to precede the astronomy boom in Greece during the 4th century. I just said that. And he's known as the founder of astronomy in some regards. He's not like the earliest to kind of talk about cosmology or philosophy for that matter, but he is given a lot of credit because the earliest was probably Thales, which he was a disciple of, but there is no like evidence of Thales' work in any way, shape, or form. So that's kind of gives the credit towards Anaximander. So, other than that, Anaximander is said to have been a heavy traveler and wore pompous garments, but that's really all we know about him. A very common theme with a lot of these early Greek astronomers and philosophers is that we just don't know that much about them, unless you know you're Aristotle or Plato. So, yeah, similarly to the last episode, we're going to jump straight into some of the work that Anaximander did and some of his theories. So, during the time of Anaximander, the hot topic of discussion was finding the origin or the guiding principle of the universe. And there were a lot of theories before Anaximander. I mean, mainly it was Thales just saying it was water. But that's not what Anaximander had in mind. He believed in perhaps a more abstract idea, and he called it the Apeiron. I hope I'm saying that right. And this is best translated to boundless or limitless. We'll get into some of the nuances with that definition. But yeah, it seems like obviously a vague approach because what is boundless, what is limitless? Our lack of knowledge of what he meant by that makes it impossible to judge the idea as vague, and this is where the nuance to the definition or the translation comes in. It's still a heavily debated thing among people who study Anaximander. They don't actually completely agree on the boundless or limitless definition, or really what it means, because there's only one piece of evidence where Anaximander refers to appearance, so it's very much up in the air. Some people dispute whether the limitless of the universe implied it was permanent or temporary. Some people just completely refute the limitless translation because they kind of dissect the word using roots, and there was one possible root of the word that would suggest it's like a sort of more of it had more of a definition that related to experience, which is weird, but I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty with that one. Basically, all you need to know is he used this word called the Apeiron. We think it translates to boundless or limitless, but we're really not sure because he only mentioned it once in a piece that still remains to this day. So, what we do know, however, which is actually quite interesting, is that the idea of limitless or boundless, if that's what it really meant, was not quite like the Greeks. It didn't really fit the way that their philosophies kind of were, like the general trend it tended to follow. So Pythagoreans believed that perfection had limits, like the limits was a part of the perfection of certain things in, I guess you could say, the universe. And if it were true that Apeiron were to mean limitless, that means it would really go against the grain of some of the schools of thought in ancient Greece. And there's also some fragments of evidence that suggest that Anaximander may have argued that Apeiron had no origin and was not an entity, yet was immortal. And the reason why there's a lot of uncertainty in that statement, if you noticed, is because this information does not come firsthand from Anaximander. We have to kind of refer to Aristotle's writing because he came sort of after him, and he talked a lot in some of his writings about theories that related to what Anaximander proposed. So we kind of just draw this connection. So yeah, him possibly suggesting that Apeiron had no origin and wasn't an entity but was immortal kind of follows along with Anaxagoras in kind of not going with the idea that the heavens were kind of responsible for the creation of the universe and, all of that mythology stuff. Additionally, the same sort of evidence suggests that Anaximander may have also tried to justify Apeiron by reverse engineering the theory. And he suggested that only in a limitless universe could creation and destruction occur continuously. So, lastly, the chain of arguments for Apeiron includes a strange claim that basically waters down to, if the universe had an end state, it would have already been reached. And this one is a really, really strange claim. I know. Like, I tried to read through it and kind of dissect it, decipher it, understand kind of what the quotations of evidence were trying to say, but all I could really catch was the idea that if the universe had an end state, it would have already been reached. So, alright. So that really sums up his universe theory. All of the things that I just mentioned, his arguments, and the idea of Apeiron. That's his whole theory. But next up is some kind of wacky stuff, which is going to get us pretty close to a geocentric model. The geocentric model is kind of going to build up as we talk about more and more Greek astronomers. So don't worry about when is he going to talk about geocentric model? He hasn't explained it yet. It's really going to come along as we talk about how some Greek astronomers and philosophers built on the idea, and everything will become a little bit more clear as we get into more details. So yeah, let's continue. So Anaximander, unlike other civilizations, I'm actually struggling to say his name because the word doesn't register well in my head. But yeah, basically, unlike other civilizations in his global proximity, let's say, Anaximander didn't make many recorded observations. There's only one that we know exists, and that is the morning set date of Pleiades. So really, that's pretty much nothing. He did not record a whole lot. And everything else he claimed about celestial objects was all speculative. But the fact that it's speculative is going to make some of the stuff that I talk about very, very interesting. It's going to start something, I'll tell you that. So his three main speculative claims were that Earth is a free-floating object in space. Celestial bodies had circular orbits that also pass underneath Earth. And he claimed that celestial bodies overlapped when we saw them in the night sky. So, when I first kind of thought about those three claims, the first thing that came to my mind is a flat Earth visualization. I always struggle to say that word for some reason. But yeah, I don't know. Like, whenever I hear those three claims, it makes me think of that stereotypical image of a possible flat Earth and just flat Earth theory. But anyways, that's really besides the point. If you do get into the details, a lot of this is going to make sense, so let's just do that. The circular orbits part is fairly simple to analyze. We know that the orbits of celestial bodies can indeed pass underneath Earth from our view. But as I commonly say, I've said a lot of times, throughout this podcast season, you have to consider the circumstances under which under which the claim was made. So we said that a lot of this stuff is speculative. He didn't have recorded observations. So really, the best that Anaximander could have done to reach this conclusion would have been to observe the arcs of the orbits of the sun, moon, etc., without getting any quantitative data, which is very, very impressive when we look at it today. If we see it under that perspective, and not when we see it from the perspective of, oh yeah, we know Johannes Kepler, figure that all out. That's not crazy. So he used this premise to develop the idea that the Earth was unsupported. How his theory goes is essentially he says that the Earth is a cylinder 3 times high as it is wide, and we live on top of the Earth because he thought that the Earth was flat. Whoa, crazy. He essentially reasoned that because the Earth was situated at the center and not the extremes of the universe in any direction, it had no inclination to move. And yeah, I mean, once we talk about that and kind of the Earth being flat and cylindrical shapes and all that weird stuff, we're going to get pretty close to the geocentric model. And from now on, it's going to be the theory is going to build itself from the ground up, as I said earlier. So the last point that I don't want to forget to discuss is the claim that celestial bodies overlapping are overlapping and tend to be behind other bodies when we see them. So Anaximander was the first person to introduce the idea of depth to the observation of celestial objects. But he thought of it in the opposite way. He thought the sun and the moon were further away than the stars, which is really difficult to justify till today. And we genuinely do not understand why he said this. Again, we don't have a lot of evidence to go off of, or any explanations from him firsthand. So other than that, from what I can recall, there's another complex idea that he thought of that was like a chariot wheel sort of system. I'm going to call it a chariot wheel system. For the sun and the moon kind of appearing and disappearing, but it's very, very tacky. So it's a difficult idea for me to process. So I would do the whole system or explaining it an injustice if I were to explain it. So other than that, Anaximander had a go at creating the map of the world and theorizing about biology, but that is really it for Anaximander, and that will be the end of the episode today. I feel like certain parts of this episode did feel a little bit mumbly-jumbly. I kind of tried to, at the end, summarize just to make sure that it was clear. But, if you guys enjoyed the explanation that I did on some of Anaximander's theories, I would sincerely appreciate a follow on Spotify if you're listening there, and a subscribe on YouTube if you're listening on YouTube. And until the next episode, I will see you guys later. Peace.